And that's my story.
Thank you. And Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Schwartz. I'm the mom of 3 children, and my family's all nearby.
Great, thank you. Okay, just by a little bit of context, we are all living through COVID and everything seems very, very different in so many ways. Among those ways are, for many, children are at home learning online. Our social lives are completely topsy-turvy and different than we ever imagined them. Parents are juggling all kinds of roles. Many of them are working from home, trying to be teacher at home, as well as taking care of the household. And grandparents want to help. So this evening, with the help of the panelists, grandparents, and adult children with children of their own, we're going to discuss family dynamics, communication, and multi-generational life during COVID. So even though we may be in the same family, many of us will have very different communication styles and different ideas about how to handle COVID. And so we want to address those issues. And also, parents and grandparents may have very different ideas about what help means and different expectations about what each of them want to give and what the others need. So to begin our conversation, I'm going to ask each of the panelists, and I'll call on you because of the Zoom nature of this discussion. But grandparents, if you would tell us what's one thing that you want to offer your children and grandchildren. And parents, what's one way that you want to be helped? So I'm going to defer to our elders and start with the grandparents. And Marcy, would you tell us one thing that you want to offer your kids and grandkids?
I would say I would like to offer my kids support because it's easier for them to deal with their kids. They're familiar with the school, they're familiar with the teachers. I'm not. Probably my skills aren't quite up to snuff of where my grandchildren are, especially the oldest. So support for my daughters and my son-in-law so that they have the time to be with the kids.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And Chuck, what do you want to offer?
Primarily, I think my best thing to offer is supervising my grandson who's on 100% virtual at the Chicago Public Schools. Of course, we're up in Highland Park. He's going to school down there, and while his parents are working full time, and helping him in any way, along with my wife, with the homework and everything else.
Yeah, great, thank you. Rachel, as a mom, as a parent, what is one way that you want to be helped?
I need respite. I need a break. I really feel like you were saying earlier, Sarah, that we're juggling so many things in one environment, working full time, and for me, managing the 3 kids. So for me, a break would be really nice if my parents could come in and watch the kids, and whether it's just so I can go out or take a bath by myself, whatever, but just that to give myself that mental break for a while would be really nice.
And Nikki, would you tell us what a parent might do to help you?
Yeah, so I guess it's really about attention. So part of the reason why we have spent so much time here is because when we weren't here with Adam and I both working full time, and Julian was kind of left on his own. He misses his friends so much, and he was defaulting basically watch TV all day. And so just to have the companionship of my parents, and they've been doing, particularly over the summer, art projects with him and keeping him occupied other than just watching TV, and hopefully a little bit of distraction from the fact that he is so isolated from his friends.
Mm-hmm. And Sandy, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Well, my kids are older teens, so they're kind of on their own and fend for themselves a lot. We check in with them, but as teenagers don't always share everything. For me, when the grandparents just check in and hey, how you doing? Everything okay? Anything you want to talk about? That's really huge for teenagers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So having the parents really reach out directly to your children, to make the connection individually, interpersonally, so you don't always have to be the intermediary.
Yeah, and we're outnumbered by the kids, so any one-on-one attention, Rachel knows what I'm talking about here, any one-on-one attention is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so both attention to the kids in that way, and, as Rachel said, just a break, whether it's to come over and, watch them, play with them so you can, take a bath, fold the laundry, get some fresh air. Maybe in some ideal world, take a walk with a friend or your spouse. And Marcy, you said, the first answer was you really want to support your kids. When you say support, could you kind of open that up a little bit? And what does that
Sure.
mean to you?
So one of my daughters has two little girls and she's about to have a third. And she wants to take the little ones to their classes when there's a class, but needs son-in-law is working downstairs. So I'm support to her in that I make it so that she can do the things she wants to do and not infringe on my son-in-law. My other daughter, whose kids are a little bit older, if I can watch a child or help with a child, that's how I can support her or pick something up for her. But truthfully, my kids consider me old and they're very worried about me being near their friends and the kids' friends. So there's some restrictions.
And we're going to talk more about the safety and the caution. But I think one thing that I really heard from everyone here is the desire for and the ability to give concrete help and support, right? So whether it's picking up the phone and saying hi to the grandkids, picking up food and dropping it off. Like Chuck, what you're doing is pretty yeoman's work, being the school supervisor, and what parents would not just be so appreciative of having another adult there that can pay that kind of attention. So that's really what I've heard is some really concrete things. Is there anyone else that has any other concrete thing that you'd ask of a parent, a grandparent, or for grandparent, one other thing you'd like to give your kid or grandkids? Yeah.
Can I
Rachel?
jump in for a second? Yeah, I think if I had to ask for anything else, it would be that my parents just listen without judgment. It's a really hard time. We're making some really hard decisions that feel very life or death right now. So they're very serious decisions. And I feel like it's easy to feel judged as a parent by your peers. And so I think just having the grandparents be really good listeners without judgment is something that I would ask for also.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is powerful. And, it's an interesting segue, but, we're all, I often say to people in my life, through COVID, there is such an enormous portion of our brains and our minds that are being taken up by this pandemic. We are figuring things out constantly. Do I go to the store? Do I not go to the store? Do I take a walk with a friend? Can I take my mask off to breathe for a minute? And, can I stand another Zoom call? So, even if we're not conscious of it, I feel like it's taking up so much energy. And so if that is one thing that we didn't have to worry about, that we're going to be judged by those closest to us.
Can I just add?
Yeah,
Can
sure,
I-
Marcy.
So I think another thing that the grandparents can do to help the parents, which it sounds like Chuck is doing, is bring some normalcy into a very abnormal time. Help them deal with a holiday. Let them do a project. We took two of our grandkids apple picking to a very small orchard because the parents are working. My husband and I still work. So if we can make something feel more normal, I think that's a huge help too.
Really nice. Yeah, really nice trying to get normalcy, especially for the young ones. So parents, are there things that your kids absolutely do not want help with that the grandparents might want to do? Can I call on somebody?
I don't know, Nikki, I don't believe we've had anything that they don't want us to do. I mean, Debbie makes lunch for Julian every day. You can see those doors behind me. Julian is in one of those offices, so I can listen in while he's going to school and make sure that he's responding when they call on him. And after school, I try to spend some time with him doing something. Go for a bike ride. It's getting a little cold for that now, although he just went with me, Nick, when I walked the dogs. Keeping him occupied.
And so Chuck, while you have the floor, are there things that you feel you just don't really want to do?
I don't want to be a full-time caretaker.
Mhm.
I mean, I've got stuff going on all day, and come the weekends, I think Deb and I pretty much feel like that's the time when the parent, our kids can spend the time with their boys. And so we kind of try to stay out of the way and let them have their family time. So I don't know, Nikki?
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you, I think, would you spend a lot more time with Julian than, I mean, I think it's a lot to expect you to put as much effort in with the 1-year-old. I mean, he's a lot. And so, there's definitely a little bit of an imbalance in there, but it's understandable. I mean, it's a lot to take care of the little guy. I think like for us, the biggest thing to sort of navigate is as, parents, I think we're a lot more strict or sensitive to, not trying to balance, how much do you allow them to kind of watch TV or do some of these things that maybe as parents we feel like are picking up bad habits a little bit, and balancing that with it's not normal time. They're not able to spend time with their friends or do their after school activities. And so what is that right balance? And so I think as parents, we might be a little bit more strict than the grandparents and sort of trying to kind of figure out, well, what is the best for the kids, and let's all get on the same page with that. And so, I mean, even I think there's 4 adults in the house, and we probably all 4 have slightly different opinions, and we're trying to figure out kind of what's normal for today and what should we allow versus, kind of understanding that this isn't normal times, but at the same time, we're 7 months in. So at some point, kind of, when do you kind of pull back the reins a little bit and say, not okay to be spending all the time on TV or what have you?
Yeah, and even during, I'm sorry, even during non-COVID times, I would say grandparents might be accused of spoiling their grandchildren just a bit more than parents. But Chuck, go ahead.
I think 2 things to point out. One is that the baby Hayden's, we've got a nanny, the kid's nanny is here too. So he's being looked after full time in that regard. And in a nod to Jerry, I've been doing the Write Your Story part of the grandparenting. And one of those prompts was about what TV shows did you like as a kid? And it just I started realizing all the TV shows that I managed to watch all those years. And I'm saying to myself, I guess I came out okay, so can't be that bad. But we did limit Julian from watching TV during the days now. So until after dinner, he's actually not allowed to watch TV or be on his iPad. So he's got to find something to do that's not digital, electronic.
But those are often challenging questions, right? When grandparents spoil or allow more than parents might prefer. And so let's talk a little bit about how you set those expectations or how you communicate about those expectations. Rachel, have you had any examples where there was a bit of a difference of opinion between you and your parents around a matter?
Yeah, I think it comes up. Yeah, I think it comes up all the time in terms of what my mom might be comfortable with us doing together, where we're going. Am I sending my kids to school? Am I keeping them remote? And so one thing I've kind of it's taken me a while throughout this process, truly, is I try and always just kind of approach every situation now. Like we all have the best intentions. We all want what's best for the children and their grandchildren. So I just try and be as transparent as possible now when things come up, like, and not in an attackful way, hey, like, this is just how I'm feeling. Can we talk about it? Because Obviously you feel differently, you know, and so I'm just trying to be as open and honest as I can to allow the discussions to just be real and still respect each other's opinions and where we're coming from.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's critical, just having an open mind to what the other person is experiencing and feeling and what their opinion of the matter is. Again, whether it's a safety issue or whether it's a raising a child issue, I think it's critical. And in this time, you know, sometimes caution goes to the wind and we do what we have to do to get through it.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
just having that understanding.
Thank you. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and some of you already alluded to this, that, you know, a huge area of concern about children is their ability to socialize normally, to have a normal socialize, playing, hanging around with friends, you know, all of that stuff that brings them in real close proximity. And for all of us, our social lives are really curtailed. We can't spend time with the people that we like, and we haven't been able to spend as much time doing the things that we like. So for the parents, can you imagine some ways that the grandparents in general can support your children's social lives? Can I start with Nikki?
Sure. So we had been very distant from my parents at the beginning of all this, and we, you know, were in close contact with them, talked to them all the time. But halfway through the summer, we took a COVID test and ended up moving in with them. And you know, even for me as an adult, I noticed the difference. I mean, it was great to spend time, the four of us, but to actually be there, so much about being in the house with them is having that socialization. And particularly over the summer, you know, having my parents play games with the kids, do art projects with them. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, Julian is, you know, missing his friends terribly, but I do think that it makes a big difference. I mean, he is so close with his grandparents. I mean, if you ask him, they're his favorite people, way above mom and dad. And so for him to be able to at least have that in his life, I think makes everything that much easier to deal with. And you know, without it, I think he would be really, really lonely.
Mhm. So it's not the same as his playmates or friends, but he's really getting something really enriching. And
Yeah.
Sandy, is there anything that you know, ways that you could see your parents sort of filling in that void that's happening right now?
I'm sorry, was that to me or
Yeah,
to Rachel? Okay.
Sandy
Yeah, thank you.
and
So
Rachel.
my oldest is actually 19. He's at his grandparents' now watching the football game. He has a close relationship with his grandfather. Of course, before he goes, I have my concerns for their health. And, you know, it's all about like, and they welcome him in. So it was their idea, but I'm like, don't take off that mask. Don't eat at their house. Don't, you know, sit far apart, even if you're masked, you know, all of those things. Because I am very concerned they have some issues with their health and that put them at risk. That said, they do more than I would normally like them to do, but you know, navigating that within their constraints as well as you know, within my own sons. So that's just a nice thing. I found out yesterday when I was visiting my mother, socially distanced with my sister in the backyard, freezing, that that she had been emailing one of my kids and asking questions about things, and that he actually responded, which, you know, is a nice thing for my kids. And you know, again, so it doesn't have to be a big thing. My children are older. They have a tendency to fend for themselves, do their own thing. They don't want too much involvement, but I really think it's important, just those check-ins.
Mhm. And Rachel, can you answer that same question?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about the socialization piece because just like I was saying, we're juggling our work and our kids in the same environment. I feel like I'm also juggling for the children, their physical health and their mental health. And it's a fine line because I also have a 12-year-old where being social is really what keeps him going after being online all day. And so I think just I know between Don and myself, our parents have been so helpful just in coming over and being goofy and having dance parties with the kids and doing art projects like you were talking about, just like art activities and painting. It's been so helpful. And also even we made a difficult decision this summer to allow our 9-year-old to play baseball. It was a very big decision. And, you know, we weighed the pros and cons, but just having our parents be able to support that aspect of their socialization and coming out in their masks outside to cheer them on, it was a really positive experience.
I'm going to get to the grandparents again in a minute. But so you've talked about, you know, phone calling, email, depending on how old your kids are, you know, virtual visits and Zoom visits. And, you know, Marcy, I don't know if you see your family that way. But related to this, you know, family members may have very different ideas about social distancing, you know, and Sandy, you made that point really clear. You feel pretty stringent, and maybe your parents aren't quite as much. So some parents may be more lenient than the grandparents are comfortable with, and some grandparents may be more lenient. Of course, we know people over 60, some may have more, that's a risk factor in and of itself. And the older we get, the more risk factors we may have. So grandparents, and Marcy, I'll start with you. What do you want your adult children to know about your approach to being with people?
They pretty much, I would say, just want me to support their decisions. So my older daughter, we have not been allowed to go to soccer games or anything like that. We have seen the kids outside with masks on only, which now will be a dilemma. I haven't been in my daughter's house in 7 months. My other daughter with the littler kids, I've been helping more hands-on. So the way that I can connect with them is to make sure they get their favorite things from me. You know, like one of them loves brownies. I make sure, I mean, I talk to them on Zoom all the time. I see them, but at a distance, but I make sure they have what they want. You know, like that I got them something special, so they know I'm connecting with what they want, more with the older ones. But that's been difficult. My oldest grandchild's 11. She is the one that's suffering the most from not seeing friends. And I'll email her and she'll say, I got your email, but she doesn't feel like emailing back, and I let it go. My daughter lets it go, I let it go. So she knows I'm there, and that's it. I definitely do not agree with all my kids' choices, which they probably know from my face, but I have not told them point blank.
Mm-hmm.
And they've created their own bubbles.
And we'll get to that a little bit more, because I think our audience is really interested in, when there are these bigger disagreements, how do families negotiate them? But before that, Chuck, I want to ask you, are there things that you want your adult children to know about, you know, how you feel about being around different people? I mean, you guys made that bubble, but you still have to go outside sometimes.
Well, Debbie and I rarely do, and my kids clearly know what our feeling is. We've been extremely cautious, especially the first 4 months or so. We finally started having cleaning help come in, but we've made it very clear that we're not going to have them into the house if they are not really completely isolated. And so basically they haven't been here and in the house. We've had a couple in the backyard. We did the garage one time when it was a little cold, but basically they know we're shut down. It's pretty clear.
And then, you know, Nikki and your family, you made the choice to abide by that kind of, I don't know what happened.
We can't.
We can barely hear you now. Now can't hear you at all.
I don't know what happened.
Did you?
Oh,
Not muted, but she's going to chat her question to us, I think.
Okay. I can read them.
my husband would say that's technology.
Exactly. And especially while the whole world is online at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's actually an area where I could have used a lot of help. Was that all 3 kids are remote and dealing with like links all day long and technology. And when it first started, it was like I really needed help. And that was the one area where I felt like my mom really couldn't be that helpful. So
So the question is, grandparents, what do you think might help your grandkids in the absence of a normal social life?
I'll jump in. I try to do stuff with Julian, play games, go for bike rides, try to get him to go for a walk, just some sort of sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
agree.
One thing you guys said before, somebody was talking about, maybe it was Nikki, about how Julian feels cut off from his friends, and it helps to have the grandparents here for, friendship and socialization. It made me realize, just listening to that, that's same for me.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're extremely cut off from people. And so just having him to fool around with and goof around with and, have a companion to go do stuff is really cathartic for me. And I'm sure Deb too.
And he's also, just to kind of add on to that, like there's a ability of the grandparents to connect with the grandkids in a way that the parents can't. Like that anger, I think, gets directed towards us. So like I've tried to play a game with him or do an activity with him, and he doesn't want to, he just wants to be in his, video game or TV. But my parents can get through to him in a way that I think sometimes Adam and I can't. And he's more willing to engage with them. And so that's helpful. And I think, being here is made a huge difference too, because Julian's not good on the phone, or, even when we were when we were completely isolated, he barely engaged with them on the phone. So for us, it makes a big difference to be in person.
Absolutely.
Am I back?
yay!
Yes.
Okay. I apologize, everybody. I got a little distracted there, as well as being muted. Sandy, thanks for pitch hitting there for me. So I'm gonna shift topics again, as we're about halfway through, and I want to hear your thoughts about conflicts and resolving them, particularly around COVID. So, let's say the 2 adult generations have some kind of disagreement, like something about mask wearing, social distancing, being outdoors or being indoors. And it's not hard to imagine that, tensions could get a little high, like who's more important, their friends or me? Who's more important, me or going to a soccer game? And also people have very different notions and different feelings of kind of how we tolerate risk. What one person may feel is cautious, another person may feel is overreacting. So panelists, I want to know from all of you, like what strategies do you find helpful to manage these kinds of conflicts and disagreements? And well, then I've got a sub question after that. So anyone got a volunteer to talk about managing disagreements?
I'll start.
Yeah, thanks, Marcy.
For me, it's I have to defer to my daughters because they are the parent. I am just the grandmother. I do not always agree with them, but it's their family, their children. I can express my opinion and then I'm done, even though I will grumble about it a lot at home. I don't necessarily agree with all their choices. And if I say it too many times, they will not hear me after that. So I just say what I think. And my feelings have gotten hurt many times when they have chosen to not have me as something for my safety that I feel bad about. So I have to get over that too. And my adult friends, as well as my adult children, everyone has very different views of what's safe and what isn't. And it's not always comfortable for the group. So my feeling is everyone has to do respectfully what works for them, and the rest of us have to just go with it.
So essentially you you try not to ruffle the feathers. You respect their opinions. It's their children, and you're trying to, yeah.
I
Anyone
have
else?
a daughter due in 8 weeks. I am going to quarantine as of December 1st because I'm staying with the kids. I have strongly suggested she might like to do the same. She does not really agree with me. I'm done. If there's consequences, she'll have to live with them. I can't tell her what to do. So that's my example.
I found
Anyone
it.
else on yeah, Rachel?
No, it's just been, it's a challenge. And so I've really tried, first of all, to respect my mom and Don's mom, their comfortability. Because to me, I'm okay, you know, I know that they're barely going anywhere and they're being safe and they're wearing masks when they go out, and social distancing. So I'm really trying to follow their lead because I want them to feel comfortable, you know. I'm comfortable with them being around me and my children, but if they want us to all wear masks when we're together or sit outside, then that's absolutely what I'm willing to do just so we can spend time together. But there's definitely conflict, you know, and I appreciate the fact, Marcy, that you're saying as a grandparent, like you can voice your opinion and then it's their decision to make. And my mom and I have had fights where I'm like, I'm pretty sure you've never parented during a pandemic before, you know, like, and it feels like when they disagree with you, it feels like they're judging you. And so I think that, and for those, like I'm close with my parents, and Nikki, it sounds like you're very close with yours also, that it's very much, you know, I want them to respect and agree with me. I value their opinion, but at times it is challenging. And so in those moments, I just have to say, you know, this is ultimately the decision we made, and I hope you can respect it.
Live with it.
Yeah, we're the ones who have to live with the consequences, you know.
Especially, oh, go ahead, Chuck.
I would have to say that we've been, I think, Nikki, we're pretty fortunate that we haven't had a lot of conflict, but there are different levels of acceptance of risk. And quite frankly, when I or Debbie feels, Deb and I will usually talk about it, and then if we feel strongly about it, we'll find the right time and the right person to talk to about the level of risk. And but for the most part, I think, Nick, I mean, we haven't had too much disagreement. I will say one thing, having the family live here, you see family dynamics that you don't necessarily otherwise see. And, you know, we just let those happen. And just like they do with me and Deb, you know, obviously Nikki grew up with us, but and Adam's, they've lived with us a couple of times over the years, but that can be a sticky wicket.
And how, oh, go ahead, Nikki, go ahead.
I would say, I mean, from in terms of like tolerance, I think at the very beginning, there was definitely concern about the nanny. And at that point, like my parents had cut themselves off from everyone. This was before we had any contact with them. And, you know, they had a good point in terms of our nanny being kind of breaking our bubble. But, you know, Adam and I were both 6 months into our new jobs. We had both started new jobs coincidentally on the same day last fall. And so, you know, we were still kind of feeling like we didn't have a lot of options. We both loved to work and loved our jobs and just needed, like, our family wouldn't have functioned without the nanny, especially with a 1-year-old. And so, you know, I think we took that concern to heart and we used it to, I think, motivated us to, I think, have a very heart-to-heart conversation with the nanny to make sure we were all on the same page and could be as careful as we could be in that situation. And then, you know, more recently, I think, to be honest, probably the concern has been more about dealing with my siblings, and that, you know, I think my parents and me and Adam are all on the same page. We're all very, very strict about COVID, and I think there's a little bit of a tendency to let it slide so that they can see their other children, and it can feel like a double standard sometimes. And so just as they've called us out with, the nanny and their concerns, we've called them out on, while we have concerns about the siblings. And to be honest, like, we have young kids. And so when my sister, I know, is, seeing friends and then comes over, and the 1-year-old's not going to socially distant from his aunt. It's just not going to happen. And so kind of navigating that. And so I guess you just, what everyone else said, you got to call it when you see it and make sure we're all sort of keeping each other. I think it's easy to justify in these situations because we're starting to all get fatigue, and you want to try and bend the rules here and there to kind of justify the actions. And I think we all have to keep each other honest and consistent.
Thank you. So it's interesting because I feel like I'm hearing two sides of the coin. One is being honest, being upfront, being honest, calling it as you see it, and being very frank. And at the same time, or at other times, knowing that you can't always say everything that's on your mind. Sometimes we have to hold our tongues for the betterment of the relationship. So those are really subtle distinctions about when is the right time to speak your truth and when is the time to kind of hold your tongue. So those are hard. Anyone have thoughts on how you know when you make each of those choices?
I can tell you it's my gut.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Does it really matter? Or does it really matter?
So that's a good question, right? Making a determination on like what really matters in that moment. Marcy, were you going to say something?
No, I agree with Chuck. I mean, I will have a tendency of making a suggestion to any of my 3 kids. I feel like they don't hear me. And my son-in-laws go, oh yeah, you leave. And they do exactly what you said. So I think it's sort of knowing your child and knowing how far you can push your boundary, and just keeping in mind that their choice for their children is their choice.
That's a perfect segue to my next question, which is about discipline. And that it always is particularly, I think, could be particularly hot button. So I'm just going to start with Rachel, and can you share your thoughts on the grandparents disciplining and stepping in? When is okay? How is okay?
Yeah. I mean, for me, if it's a safety issue, I think I absolutely expect and rely and want them to jump in. If they're there and they're present, it needs to be addressed. Otherwise, I would say for the most part, my parents defer, they defer to us. They defer to my husband and I about how we want to handle that situation. And we've definitely gotten comments when we haven't been patient and how they felt about it if we weren't so patient. And other times I've actually had my mom give me, kudos and say, wow, I actually really appreciated the way you handled that. I learned something from you by the way you responded. So for the most part, I prefer, that they defer to my husband and I for the discipline. But overall, if it is a safety issue, I absolutely want them to jump in. And by the way, if they do say something, even if I don't necessarily agree with it, I don't disagree in front of the kids with them. I really, really try. I want them to respect their grandparents, and I want them to see us all as a united front. So in terms of that, I really try to keep that between us.
Yeah, I think that can be really important for children to see that adults are on the same page. And then you can have that conversation at another moment. Nikki, do you have anything you'd like to share about when or how grandparents make discipline?
Yeah, I mean, most of the issues we've had have just been sort of with, attitude in terms of the way that they'll talk to both me and to my parents. And I think it's, a function of being fed up with the situation. And so, if he's not talking respectfully to anybody in the house, like, I want them in that moment to push back on Julian. I mean, the 1-year-old probably doesn't need to be disciplined in that way, but push back on Julian and let him know that's not okay and address it in that moment. And luckily we haven't had anything more pressing happen. I will say the other thing is that, we kind of, the grandparents get to sort of be the one that he runs to. And so when we're upset about something and disciplining him, he's a very sensitive kid. So it actually sort of works out that he has them to kind of play that other role and kind of take him down a notch in terms of his emotions. And so it sort of works out to have that balance of we're sort of there to tell him that that's not okay. But then when he gets really worked up, the grandparents can sort of step in and calm him down in the moment. So it sort of has been a good collaboration.
Yeah, that's a really nice point. I mean, it's a little bit like kind of the good cop, bad cop, but
Yes.
but the grandma or grandpa or both of them are like a safe haven that they can run to when they need it. And parents have to be the bad guy. You have no choice. But grandparents don't always have to be the bad guy. Yeah. Sandy, do you have anything to add from when your kids were younger or?
No, my in-laws and my mother and I did not necessarily agree on discipline. And so there were some issues there. And I think that speaks to our kids' relationship with them now.
Yeah, thank you. And I have kind of a final question for the grandparents, and then we may have some opportunity to take questions from the audience. So, everyone is in different circumstances. We have an extended family living in the same household, grandparents, kids, grandkids, people living nearby and able to see one another. And I imagine in our audience, we have people that may be living, as far as different states, even living in different countries from one another. So to our grandparents, what's one strategy that you use to stay connected to your loved ones who are not in the same home with you? And then I'll ask it of the younger generation too.
Mm-hmm. I guess just kind of keeping up with things that would interest them. My grandson likes football. I'll mention football, or I'll check in. He loves weather. I'll text him like, are we going to have a storm, to engage in something he likes? And I get the cues from the mom for sure. And the littler ones, the same thing. I kind of have a sense of what they like, and I can very easily tap into that, which they think is the greatest thing in the world. And so that's the connection. But it's like kind of intuitive, and a little help from the parents. Like the kids are really into this. Like Halloween's coming up. The kids are not going to have a normal Halloween. So I made sure that I put together like a little gift basket of things that they will all like. And when I gave it to them, they were like oohing and eyeing over their favorite candy, like little things like that. So they feel like I get them.
Nice. And Chuck?
Well, thanks. Well, first of all, Nikki's immediately younger daughter, or younger sister, our middle daughter, and I are in business together. So I talk to her every day almost. So we stay in touch quite carefully. And when we first started this whole thing, we started doing Zoom dinners every night. And that was when Nikki and Adam, and they were still living in the city. And it got a little, we did it for probably 2-3 months, wouldn't you say, Nick? And it just got kind of, I don't want to say boring, but routine, and we dropped that. But we do that occasionally, and we will talk to the kids. We're a really tight-knit group, and so especially with Debbie, they'll call the other kids, the younger ones will call. I see the number come up on the phone all the time with issues, one thing or another. So I don't know, we're very close, all of us, and we talk to them all the time.
Yeah. Anybody who has family that's a little far, how do you stay connected?
For a while we were doing, when we were doing our shelter in place, and we really were not like even leaving our house for the most part, my parents and my brother and a lot of people would play games with my kids over either FaceTime or like really creative, like old school, like back to the basics, I'm going to hum a song and see if you can guess it. or I'm going to draw a picture of an animal. Tell me what, and like, I mean, but they would make it interactive. And so it wasn't like them just sitting on another Zoom call where they're listening to a story or watching, passively on screens, but it was actually like a back and forth. And so that was positive in terms of like keeping them engaged and connected a little bit.
Yeah, cool. Nikki, were you going to say something else?
Yeah, well, Rachel, I love that. I might have to steal it because I have to tell you, I mean, to get in an 8th grader, I mean, yeah, I can get him to Zoom with his friends, but to talk to like his grandparents on the East Coast, it's really hard. He loves his grandparents, and when he sees them in person, this is Adam's parents, they have a great relationship, but he just doesn't, he's not, I mean, when I travel for work, I can barely get him to say hi to me on the phone. So it is really hard. I mean, we try and at least like once a month, I wish it was more, do a Zoom call and, thank God for having kind of video conference, FaceTime and all that, but it's hard. And then you have the 1-year-old and the 8-year-old fighting over, attention on the phone. So it turns into chaos, but we try. And everyone knows we try our best, but it is hard. But I love, Rachel, that idea to incorporate more of an activity. So I might try that.
Yeah, it reminds me of a couple things. First of all, before Nikki and the Friedmans moved in with us, we would read to Julian every night a book. And when he'd call, he would generally call us when he was ready for bed, and we'd read to him. But before we'd read to him, I would always chit chat with him for 5 or 10 minutes first. And, so we had that. And I forgot that over the summer, the other kids would come up for a bike ride. I'm a kayaker and I have a fleet of boats, and occasionally we would make arrangements to go out, and it's very easy to stay social distance outdoors, with everybody in their own boat and all, so out on the lake. And so we would see them in that fashion. But now that it's getting cold, it's getting harder for that.
Yeah, thank you. Sandy?
Yeah, we've done a connection similar to what Rachel was saying, where we've sort of resurrected the old school games. So Battleship, we've had Battleship tournaments, and you can do that where one player is on one side of the universe and the other player is on the other side of the universe, because you don't have to be in the same spot. And it's amazing to me, my children who never wanted to do some of our board games have played Monopoly for hours on end. And we've done some of those things that, because right now it's so novel to them, because it's something that's not online. So it's really special.
And I'm also a fan of the old-fashioned letter. And I think for an elementary school child, to get a letter that they might be able to read themselves that actually has a stamp and is addressed to them can be kind of exciting. When they're little, we have to be careful with our penmanship so that we write in clear block letters so that they can read it. Cursive, I'm afraid, is a lost art, but maybe some older kids can read cursive. So it is kind of interesting how COVID is sending us back to some of the old school ways of connecting. Just like people have talked about, they're baking bread, they're taking up knitting, people are doing jigsaw puzzles, as well as having, Chuck's a jigsaw puzzler. We've got the benefit of things like Zoom. It's amazing. We have the benefit of telephone and email and texting, and we can use all of that to our advantage. And, we just have a couple of moments before I want to wrap up with some final information, but I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience that has a question for any of our panelists, or would potentially like to give us some tips that you've used. And we can look at the chat if you wanted to type a question or a comment into the chat. And I'll give that a few moments. And tell you that the grandparent-grandchild connections will be hosting at least one more of these COVID-related grandparent-grandchild topics. And on November 16th, the next topic is going to be about how to use technology to better maintain those relationships. And there may be one more to come. It looks like we have a chat, a question. This is a toughie. What is everybody going to do for Thanksgiving?
Very good question.
I was just talking about this with my mom today. This is like our ongoing conversation, and we still don't have an answer. I mean, I said, Mom, is it realistic if I rent space heaters and clean out our garage and have it there? And I'm like, that's always an option, isn't it? And she's just worried it's still going to be too cold. So I don't know.
I hate to interrupt. I heard the most interesting thing just today, which basically exhorted us to all be flexible about Thanksgiving. So let's say we find out mid-November that the Sunday before Thanksgiving is going to be really nice weather. Let's do it. Let's not be tied to the third Thursday of November. But isn't that right? It was like a light bulb.
Brilliant. Yeah.
No. So go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, we're going to try and do a Zoom thing in our own pod and engage the kids in planning a menu and cooking the food. And again, they're older, so they cook all the time. It's cleaning that's the challenge. So we'll go through that a bit and again, try and celebrate the true meaning behind Thanksgiving and what we're really thankful for. And we'll miss out on some good food.
We're going to try possibly the garage. One of the kids has a very large garage, and if not, one of them is going to completely empty out their basement, which is the length of their house. And we're going to try and do one family, like probably 20 feet apart from the next family and the next family. But that will depend on where all the rules are then. If it's worse or if it's better, or, who knows?
Right. So maintaining flexibility as best as we can.
Yep.
Which I think we have all become incredibly agile at doing. And one thing that really amazes me, especially for the grandparents, because you're the oldest among us, things are still new, right? Like this is something that you've never experienced before. And no matter how old we get, there is as difficult as this is, to me, it's an interesting phenomena that we can still navigate and negotiate things that we've never done before. I think there might be one more comment or question. Now people are telling us thank you and that it was a great discussion. So I think that is an excellent place to end. And I want to thank everybody for your participation and your comments and really being willing to share some of your personal experiences with an audience of about 40 people from all over the country, I think. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.